All right, so are you ready for this? Today we're going to deep dive into this chapter from A Journey from Heartache to Hope.
Oh yeah, this one's a tough one.
Yeah, by Chris Piorkowski, and seriously, get the tissues ready.
It's a powerful story of resilience and faith. Chris and his wife Lisa, they went through something most of us can't even imagine.
Seriously, just reading their story, I was up and down and all around emotionally. You mentioned faith, and Chris's background actually makes it even more interesting.
Oh, definitely.
He's a musician, like a film composer. You wouldn't picture someone like that going through all this medical drama, right?
Right, not your typical image. But that's actually what makes it so interesting. This chapter is all about Lisa's cancer coming back after like 14 years.
Oh, wow.
14 years of thinking you're good only to have it come back.
I can't even imagine. That must have been devastating. The book really goes into Chris's struggles,
Yeah.
balancing, taking care of Lisa, going through all this again. And he was also trying to finish his MFA at the same time.
Oh, wow. So like trying to keep things normal while everything's falling apart.
Exactly. And then you add the financial stress, which no one really talks about, but it's a huge part of serious illnesses. Over $100,000 for Lisa's surgery, and then $5,000 for every chemo treatment.
Like every treatment is a risk, financially and medically. You could be drowning in debt and still not get better.
It's a lot to handle, and it makes you realize how fast your life can change because of a health crisis. But even with all that, there are these little moments that really stick with you, like Lisa refusing to use a bedpan after her surgery. She said it was undignified.
Even when she's in so much pain and vulnerable, she's still holding on to her dignity. It says a lot about her.
And Chris, he actually carried her to the bathroom because of that, and she probably wasn't exactly light after surgery.
Yeah, that shows you how strong their love was. Like, even in the darkest times, their love still shined through.
Absolutely. And it gets even more interesting when Chris starts looking into these alternative treatments for Lisa.
Oh, yeah.
He was convinced that diet played a big role in fighting cancer, so he started giving her herbal remedies alongside her chemo, even though the doctors didn't really know much about it.
So like herbs and special diets, stuff that's not always scientifically proven.
Right, and that brings up a lot of ethical questions, like when you're desperate, you'll try anything, but where do you draw the line? Was he being irresponsible, putting faith before proven treatments, or was it a brave thing to do?
Yeah, it's a tough call, and I'm sure some people questioned him, but remember back then, information wasn't as easy to find as it is now.
True.
He was basically going on instinct and his belief in natural healing.
And here's the crazy part. After just 2 days on these supplements, Lisa's white blood cell count stabilized.
Wow.
And that's important because white blood cells help fight infections, which are a big risk during chemo. So basically, her body was responding well to these supplements, and the doctors were baffled.
So much relief, but also confusion. It really makes you wonder if maybe there's more to alternative medicine than we know.
It definitely challenges our ideas about medicine, and it led Chris to making some big decisions. They ended up moving to Denver for a job opportunity.
Wait, like just up and moved while Lisa was in treatment?
Yep, and it wasn't just any move. They got this fancy sky house downtown, like floor-to-ceiling windows, amazing city views, the whole thing.
Wow.
But then 2 months later, they get a job offer from Liberty University.
So another move. Wait, Liberty University, isn't that in Virginia?
1,500 miles away in Lynchburg, to be exact.
Seriously. All while she's battling cancer.
It's wild, right?
Wow. This part of their story really gets to me. It shows how strong their faith was and how dedicated they were to each other. But how did they even manage Lisa's care with all that moving around?
That's a great question, and that's what we'll get into next. Moving that much definitely had a huge impact on their lives, and their relationship was tested in ways most couples can't even imagine.
I can't even imagine trying to keep up with her treatment while constantly moving.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house on a foundation that's constantly shifting. And you mentioned the emotional side of things, too.
Right.
Chris talks about feeling isolated, especially within their church community.
It's interesting, isn't it? You'd think that'd be the place that they'd find the most understanding and support.
You'd think so, right? Like a warm embrace, a shoulder to cry on. But Chris talks about these awkward interactions with people asking these typical relationship questions. Like,
Oh, gosh.
what are you guys learning as a couple? Like, come on, their situation was anything but typical.
It really shows how disconnected people can be from the realities of dealing with a serious illness. They want to be supportive, but they just end up saying these meaningless things.
Right. It's like they were stuck in this bubble of normal while Chris and Lissa were going through this completely different experience, and it wasn't just the church community either. Chris even mentions hearing about spouses leaving their partners after a brain cancer diagnosis.
Wow, that's harsh.
It's a really tough reminder that even the strongest commitments can be tested when things get really difficult. It makes you think about what in sickness and in health really means. Chris definitely lived up to that vow, though.
He absolutely did. He never gave up on Lisa even when things were incredibly challenging. And remember, it wasn't just the moving. Chris describes how Lisa could only be active for about 4 hours a day before needing to rest. Imagine the impact that had on their relationship, their ability to communicate.
It's like living life in slow motion while everything else is moving at a million miles an hour.
Exactly. And on top of all of that, Chris is still wrestling with these ethical questions about alternative treatments. He's desperately trying to make the best decisions for Lisa, but the medical community isn't giving him much guidance on how diet might affect her tumor.
He must have felt like he was walking a tightrope trying to balance hope and desperation. On one side, there's the potential for these alternative therapies to help maybe give Lisa more time, a better quality of life, but then there's the risk, the uncertainty, the possibility of making things worse.
It's a huge gamble with the high stakes, and Chris is basically acting as both the gambler and the doctor. The weight of those decisions, knowing every choice could have such a huge impact. I wonder if I'd be brave enough to challenge conventional wisdom like that, to make my own path.
It's a question that really sticks with you, but even with all the difficulties, their faith remained a constant source of strength.
It's almost like a paradox, isn't it? Their world was falling apart, yet their faith gave them this sense of stability, this unwavering belief that they weren't going through it alone.
Chris describes their faith as a compass guiding them through the storm, and it wasn't just blind faith. Their belief actually motivated their actions, their choices, their willingness to try these unconventional approaches.
It's amazing how resilient people can be, how they find meaning and purpose, even in the darkest times. It makes you think about how our own beliefs shape how we deal with hardship.
Their story reminds us that sometimes the most important journeys aren't about the destination. It's about how we change and grow along the way.
It's about learning to navigate the unknown, to find strength in unexpected places, and to hold on to love and faith even when it seems like everything's against you.
Wow, so we've really gone through it with Chris and Lisa. Their story is just incredible, all the challenges they face. But what can we take away from all of this? What can our listeners learn from their experience?
I think their story is so powerful because it goes beyond the specifics. It's not just about cancer or alternative treatments or even faith. It's about the human spirit and how strong it can be even when facing unbelievable hardship.
I think you're right. It's easy to focus on the details, but the core message is universal. It's about love and how it can endure, how it adapts, and how it perseveres even when life is throwing its worst at you.
Definitely. And it makes me think about my own life, my own relationships. How often do we take those little moments of connection and support for granted? Chris and Lisa's story is a reminder to cherish those things, to really value the bonds we have, because you just never know what life's going to throw at you.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm also struck by how willing they were to challenge the norm. They didn't just accept the limits of traditional medicine. They looked for other options, even if it meant going against the grain. It shows that we always have choices, even when it feels like we don't.
And those choices aren't always easy. There's risk, there's uncertainty. Chris and Lisa had to weigh the potential benefits against the potential harm, and they chose to create their own path that takes so much courage and a willingness to trust your gut.
It also highlights how important community is, having a support system that really gets what you're going through. They faced isolation, misunderstanding, judgment. Even it's a reminder that sometimes the people you expect to be there for you might not be, and that support can come from the most unexpected places.
It shows that we need to be more open and honest about illness, both for the person experiencing it and those around them. We need to create spaces where people feel safe to share their struggles, their fears, their doubts without being judged.
Their journey wasn't a fairy tale. There were dark times, moments of despair, questioning everything. But even in those moments, they held on to hope. They found meaning. They kept going.
And that's the biggest lesson, isn't it? Life is a journey, and it's rarely easy. There will be obstacles, detours, moments that test us to our core. But those are the moments that reveal our true strength, our resilience, our capacity for love and compassion.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What would it look like to bring a little bit of Chris and Lisa's spirit into our own lives? Facing the unknown with courage, cherishing the moments with our loved ones, never giving up on hope even when things feel uncertain.
Their story shows us that even in the darkest of times, life can be beautiful, meaningful, and full of love. That's a message we should all carry with us long after we're done listening today.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.